Sound of thunder. Down, but the spear turns to the right. Come down to 500 meters. 4 points. Turn nicely for the slow roll. Picks up David.
Thank you. Choose for your runway.
Rolls the aircraft. On the approach, Glenn Warden is going for the touch and go. That's flipping Hardidar right on the side of the runway. That's what we don't want, but he's going. He's committed. He comes down. He's rolling. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Hello everyone, it is Maximus, your one and only. I'm sorry, I can't do French accents. Welcome everyone, it is your one and only Maximus. I really appreciate you being here on today's video. We are touching back into the world of military aviation to a tiny little fighter jet that really has come across as a very prestigious French air superiority platform. Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not a subject matter expert when it comes to anything aviation, because I'm not a flyboy. My real speciality or passion is armored fighting vehicles. However, learning about aircraft is something I'm very intrigued into doing, because they are, at the end of the day, the staple of any military power to dominate the skies. And this aircraft definitely has the capability to do so for many militaries around the world. So we're going to discuss the overview of this aircraft, the Dassault Mirage 2000, and some of its different variants. So let's get going. In 1972, the program ACF, or Airplane Future Combat for Air Superiority, was launched. The aircraft must have a fixed wing, 2 reactors, M53s, and replace the Mirage F1 and 3. This program, too ambitious, was stopped as of December the 12th, 1975, and the prototype was completely unfinished. It was scrapped. But the Delta 2000, a single engine designed on its own funds, aroused the interest of the Air Force of France. Smaller and less expensive than the ACF, likely to compete with the F-16, it was chosen on December 18th, 1975. It was designed by a team gathered around Valeres, Caprivi, Weber, Verin Falcoz, and quickly renamed the Mirage 2000. The Mirage 2000 returns to the famous Delta formula, but includes the CDVE, a first for a European plane. Its wing is equipped with a variable camber and has only really been made possible by newer technologies during its time of development. It is produced naturally unstable, very similar to that of the Eurofighter Typhoon. The aircraft, however, is manageable though with the fly-by-wire system, and because of the centre of gravity merges with the centre of the plane, it provides a very stable platform and very good for dogfighting or outmanoeuvring other aircraft or missiles. Although it resembles the Mirage 3 or 5 externally, it is an entirely new aircraft. Its cell, or the majority of the internal components, is mainly built of aluminum, or aluminium for those who get upset of me saying aluminum, but it also contains high amounts of titanium and carbon fibers to reduce its overall weight. There were many different prototypes of this aircraft made, however the Mirage 2001 flew for the first time on March 10, 1978, with the 04 finally finishing its prototype flight in 12th of May 1980. The Mirage 2000 really made its overall first public appearance at Farnborough in the same year of which the F-16 was competing against this package. You know, I'm sure there's going to be a number of you in the comment section that are going to make some French jokes about how, the French military have white flags and, all that sort of stuff. But if you just take a little bit of time to research French aviation, there is a lot of contributions of which the French have made. There were a lot of French aircraft fighting in World War I. French companies helped bring major advantages to the aviation technology, for instance the Concorde, the Caravelle, and France continues to advance in aviation technology today, including their significant contributions to Airbus, which continues to be a really big driving force in air transport today, and the same thing applies for military aviation. When I think of this jet, I think of Titanic. I know you're probably wondering where am I going with this, but the scene of which where Jack is being told, "Jack, paint me like one of your French girls." Well, one of these aircraft would be certainly one of those French girls that I would want to paint. They are absolutely beautiful little fighter jets. That delta wing really does come out as one of the key prominent features. I mean, it really is just beautiful. A pure delta wing aircraft, and it's sleek, it's smooth, its body style is beautiful, but that refueling probe on the front really does look like a wart on the front of it. It really it's totally out of shape, but overall an absolutely stunning aircraft in general. The two circular inlets with the adjusting shock cones on either side of the cockpit feed one engine, the Mpactha M53 afterburning turbofan. The fuel-efficient turbofan puts out around 12,230 pounds of dry thrust, which leaps to a massive 19,400 pounds when the afterburners kick in. That's really not too bad for a fighter plane with a loaded weight of around 30,000 pounds. This thrust-to-weight ratio is greater than the nimble MiG-21, but isn't quite reaching the level of its beautiful competitor, my favourite fighter jet in the world, other than the F-22, the F-16. And yes, I will eventually be doing a full review video on the F-16. The real magic of the Mirage 2000C is that delta wing. The delta wings create lots of lift at high angles of attack due to how air flows over the leading edges, making the aircraft they're very, very maneuverable. They generally don't do so well, however, at subsonic speeds, and delta wings produce a lot of drag at slower speeds. For a military fighter aircraft, however, high-speed maneuverability is a good trade-off for poor subsonic performance, in my own personal opinion. To make things interesting, the Mirage 2000C was actually designed to inherently be very unstable, although this enables a much greater degree of maneuverability than a conventionally marginal stable aircraft. The 2000C's advanced fly-by-wire system is constantly working to keep that pointy end of the aircraft forward. All it takes is one flip of the FBW disable switch to really appreciate what the computer is trying to do. In other words, you really would not want to be turning off that system in flight. Internally, the aircraft has a very advanced war machine fighting capability. In addition to the high-tech systems that are handling the control surfaces, a central computer connects to the inertial navigation system, an air data computer, and the radar Doppler impulsion system, or RDI. This is a pulse Doppler radar that has an integrated combat package. Throw in the radar altimeter, radar warning receiver, and both heads-up displays and heads-down displays, and you've got one heck of a good time on your hands. To bring down its aerial prey, the M2000C has a twin 30mm cannon with around 125 rounds each, nestled quite snugly under its chin, and 4 of its underwing pilots can carry the Mpactha Super 530 semi-active radar homing missiles and the Magic or Magic 2 infrared missiles. Another aerial weapon is the MICA, which is a very French-speaking word for a long-range air-to-air intercept combat missile. The MICA supports a maximum operating range of around 60 kilometers, and the aircraft can carry 4 of these missiles with 2 Magic missiles and 3 drop tanks simultaneously. The Mirage 2005 can fire the MBDA Super 530D missile or the MBDA Sky Flash air-to-air missile as the alternative to the MICA missile. The aircraft in some regard is a multi-role fighter, and therefore it is equipped to carry a range of air-to-surface missiles and weapons, including laser-guided bombs. These include many different munitions from MBDA, a major firearms/weapon systems manufacturer, and they produce laser-guided bombs, anti-radar missiles, anti-ship missiles, and even the missiles that are used from the Apache helicopter that will be eventually replacing the Maverick/Hellfire platform. The aircraft, to deter itself from those nasty little missiles, is also equipped with a self-protection suite installed internally. The Mirage 2005 carries the ICMS Mark II Automated Integrative Countermeasure System. The ICMS Mark II incorporates a receiver and associated signal processing system in the nose section for detection of missile command data links. Basically, the aircraft can detect multiple missiles and actually even pass on those missile detections to other aircraft in the vicinity, almost like a battle management system. The performance of the Mirage 2000 is also quite impressive. It can climb at a rate of 285 meters a second. The maximum speed of the aircraft is round about 2,530 kilometers an hour, and its ferry range is 3,335 kilometers. The range and service ceiling are 1,550 kilometers and 70,060 meters respectively. The Mirage 2000 has obviously taken a lot of interest from other countries around the world. Orders for 110 Mirage 2005s were placed by the air forces of France, Taiwan, and Qatar and Greece. The first Mirage 5 was delivered to Taiwan in December 1997. Around 57 Mirage 2000s are currently in service with Taiwan. Greece acquired 15 Mirage 2005 Mark IIs, upgraded to the 10 of its Mirage 2000s to the same standards. They first entered production in September 2004 and concluded their deliveries in 2007. The United Arab Emirates ordered 20 Mirage 2009s and 12 Mirage 2009D aircraft, customized versions of the Mirage 2005s, which were delivered between 2003 and 2007. Brazil also agreed to buy 12 of the ex-French Air Force Mirage 2000C aircrafts. The aircraft really has a lot of different contracts going on. It's a popular aircraft. It's got a lot of good features. It's fairly cheap for the time period that it's been designed for, and the modernization for it will increase the lifespan for at least 20 years from what they're saying right now. Overall, the Mirage 2000 is a small, light, and maneuverable aircraft with that beautiful delta wing capability, which promotes its chances of being in close air support and close air combat very, very successful. Although really intended primarily for hunting, it has proven very flexible and has shown availability for both ease of maintenance and durability in its part, its processing of repair. So, it's a lot better for companies and countries that want to try and get this aircraft repaired and sent back out in the fleet. That's a good thing. Changing of parts for aircraft can be very expensive, and if they can try and create a platform that is cross-compatible between many of the older platforms, that's what they would try and do. It for sure is going to remain in service for a few decades, I'm sure, to come, especially in its more modernized versions. And it's a formidable fighter. I would not want to be going up against it if you're a low-tier, lower generation aircraft going into a combat situation. Of course, stealth is not a thing with this aircraft. It was never really something that was considered. But in terms of its hunter-killer capability, it really is ticking just about every single box. For a tiny little fighter like this, I think it's got quite a lot running for it. It's similar to the F-16, A lot of people make fun of me when I say the F-16 is one of my favorite fighter jets, and it baffles me as to why they think that way, because although it's a single-engine fighter, and a lot of people get very upset with the single-engine platform, because if the engine fails, it's got nothing to back it up. I don't buy into that, Engines should last a very long time. I work in the aviation industry. I know how engines work. I know of their maintenance schedules, the engineering that goes into them. And honestly, if an engine is maintained properly, you should have nothing to worry about. That's the key to this, is some of these engines have been on aircraft for a very long time. They've been tried and tested. They're not going to keep them on an aircraft that's going to fail. So a lot of it's down to maintenance and just not correct care. So the argument of, it's just a single-engine fighter, it's not got that good capability of being into a combat situation, I don't believe that. That's just my opinion. I think single-engine fighters still have a huge amount of potential in the modern battle airspace. But again, I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to aviation. It really doesn't matter what I say. I'm not a fighter pilot. I have no true credibility to these aircraft or their capabilities. But for me, it just makes sense. This is really an interceptor. It's a hunter. It's there to go and find other fighters within, an airspace and take them out. It can go into sort of the strike roll capability, but I don't really think that was its main purpose. It doesn't really have, in my eyes, screaming out, aerial bomber. A lot of the kind of same principles were placed upon the Eurofighter Typhoon. To me, it's the French version of the Eurofighter Typhoon, really. It's like its little kind of cousin. They very, very similar kind of design and styling, and it's just a gorgeous jet. I mean, it's just...
At this year's Dubai Air Show, the UAE announced it plans to upgrade its Dassault Mirage 2000-9 and F-16 Block 60 fighters, instead of buying replacements such as the Eurofighter, Gripen, or Rafale. First ordered in 1998, the UAE's Mirage 2000-9 fleet includes 20 single-seaters and 12 two-seaters. Earlier in 1983, the UAE ordered 36 Mirage 2000s, and these were later upgraded to 2000-9 configuration. The single-engine Mirage was Dassault's first fly-by-wire aircraft, and helped pave the way for development of not only the Rafale, but also a family of fly-by-wire business jets. The aircraft is powered by a Snecma M53P2 turbofan engine, capable of delivering 15,000 pounds of thrust, or 21,000 pounds with afterburner.
Ovambaland at dawn, and a remote corner of Africa wakes up to another day of war. Two forces battle for military supremacy against a backdrop of divided ideologies.
Congo, the border between Southwest Africa and Angola. It's here that the war began on a dark October 1966 night. SWAPO terrorists came across from Angola, hit the customs post in Southwest Africa, and withdrew. There were no casualties. They set a light to the house of the building and waited for the inhabitants to run out, but they didn't. The security forces followed up the next day, and the war has continued this way ever since.
By contemporary standards, it's not a big war, though it follows the classic insurgent pattern of infiltration and subterfuge. It's across this cut line, bordering on Angola, which is routinely patrolled by South African security forces, that an insurgent army attached to the Marxist-backed Southwest African People's Organization infiltrates into the territory. And SWAPO is active. On roads like this, they lay their landmines. Sometimes, not very often, they will ambush a vehicle. Their objective, chaos. For South African and Southwest African security forces, focal point of the conflict is Oshakati, capital of Ovambaland. A decade ago, it was a village. Now it's a military fortress from where every SWAPO move is monitored. Here at the headquarters of Sector 10 is probably the most active operations room on the African continent. Here too, the nature and extent of day-to-day hostilities is decided and acted upon, even when the South Africans launch cross-border raids into Angola in hot pursuit operations. Any hostile presence or action prompts a reaction. These men decide how, where and when. Their orders are acted upon in a dozen frontline operations rooms, like this one. It's also a frustrating war, for real combat provides these men with the highlights of their border stints. The rest of the time they wait and do the best they can under difficult circumstances. But there are others who believe in their cause.
What were you doing before you came to Africa?
Well, before I came to Africa, I was in the corporate community. I was a corporate banker.
So it's quite a change for you.
That's quite a big change, but I enjoyed it. It was what I came over here to do.
How long have you been here now?
Been here almost 2 years now.
And all of this time in full-time military service?
Yes, sir.
Have you been on any external operations?
We've been on a few, sir.
You've seen
The regular soldiers pay.
Have you seen a good deal of action in this operation?
I've seen a few.
You've been into Angola?
I've been in a few cities, yes.
Well, I believe what I'm doing, and it's an ideological kind of thing. But I came over here to join up with these people and help fight for what they believe in.
Many Africans too have their stake in the ultimate outcome of this conflict. Like this little boy, Andreas, who lives permanently on a military base in the operational area.
God, we found this little chap about 2 years ago, and we came from a patrol, and we found him. He stopped us just before the road and indicated 2 landmines to us. There were 3 chaps looking at towards the road where we were, and he indicated one of the chaps was swaps. So we took these 3 people away, and we found it safe for this guy to stay in the base from there.
Did you lift those landmines at the time?
That's right.
And how does he assimilate in the base itself?
He helps us a lot in the base. He works here in the kitchen, and he helps a lot. We see that he gets close in there.
But why don't you let him go back to his own people?
He's got no living relatives. His people have been killed by SWAPO.
But surely he would be more comfortable with people of his own kind. I mean, he's living in Ovambaland.
We can't let him go out, because then it would be a dead duck, because people will kill this little guy.
As small as he is?
That's right, because he worked with us. So they won't accept him back in his own tribe.
Andreas started life in a land cleaved by conflict. This war could also be his end. For some, not as fortunate as he, it has been, for this is the stark and brutal reality of war.
You don't need to kill people to have terrorism. You can also burn or destroy that which is precious to them, like this church. Until last night, It was the only place of worship within a radius of about 40 kilometers. Now, you have ruin.
Also destroyed was the only school in the region, together with most of the little things that meant much to a not so very sophisticated people. Their desks, their books, their playthings. Other children live permanently in the Ovambo operational area. A fairly large white community centered on the two main towns, Oshakati and the Air Force base at Ondangwa, also makes demands on the security forces. Like these youngsters who travel 30 kilometers each day in a landmine-proof vehicle to get to school. People have been killed on this road and no one is taking any chances. It's beyond the main centers that the real war continues. Deep into the interior of Ovamboland, where no one travels out of convoy. And when you do, it's in a vehicle that can absorb the blast of a Soviet TM-57 landmine, powerful enough to blow a truck to scrap in an instant. Then sometimes, SWAPO's landmines find the security forces before they are discovered. This happened on our second day out, when a troop carrier was blown up on one of the smaller roads close to the Angola border. It's happened many times before, and the reaction was always the same. The hole, often a meter deep, a mangled truck. The heat generated by a landmine is intense. For a fraction of a life-destroying second, it can exceed 3,000 degrees centigrade. Every landmine incident is recorded. Another statistic. Engineers check out each blast for detail, the kind of mine or perhaps 2 or 3 landmines laid in echelon.
This essentially is what the war is all about. SWAPO's cohorts come across the border from Angola with their landmines, they lay them in the roads and they try to blow up the trucks. This particular vehicle was made in South Africa, designed for anti-landmine warfare. It's constructed in such a way that people inside are injured very lightly or at most receive perhaps a concussion or hurt ribs. In this particular case, 2 people were lightly injured. Because of the advance in anti-landmine warfare, this contrasts very heavily with what happens to civilian people that ride over these same landmines. And we've had instances where buses have been blown up with 30 or 40 people injured and killed.
You need a strong stomach to understand some of the atrocities that are committed in the name of peace. We came back from patrol tonight to find this gruesome scene awaiting us. A landmine laid by SWAPO terrorists that destroyed a truck carrying children home from school. The rest were brought to hospital at Oshakati. These are some of the victims. Others were much worse. There were 17 people on the vehicle. 7 were killed outright. The authorities maintain a full-time medical team in the operational area to cope with just such emergencies. This one is headed by Dr. Van Niekerk, Chief Medical Officer for the region.
Doctor, we've seen some pretty gruesome sights tonight, which are unusual to us, but I gather they are not so unusual to you. Does this sort of thing happen very often?
Yes, correct. It happens at least every fortnight, this type of thing.
So many casualties?
We have frequent cases of less casualties, but major thing like this, almost every fortnight, at least twice a month.
And there's many children, is this?
Yes, well, that depends on the circumstances, you know. This happened now when the children were on their way back from school, so...
These were the lucky ones. They survived, more or less intact. Others were far more brutally mutilated, such as this little boy who survived the blast of a SWAPO-laid bomb which went off in his face. Today he's totally blind and scarred almost beyond recognition. There are others at the Churchwan Institute near Oshakati with similar problems. This little boy lost both his arms in a terrorist blast. Against this background, hostilities continue. The South Africans employ every possible means to counter the war being waged against them from Angola. Tactics include the deployment of motorcycles, dogs, and even horses. For the war being fought in the arid wastes of northern Southwest Africa also incorporates one of the last great cavalry units of modern times.
Gaan!
Most modern terrorist-orientated conflicts involve the use of tracker dogs. This one is no exception, though one of the prime limitations is water in a region where every man carries just enough for his own use. But the real war in Southwest Africa still revolves around the man on the ground with a gun in his hand. This is how the insurgent comes across the border. This is how the South Africans counter his presence. The task is not an easy one. Everything centers on tracks, such as this Eastern Bloc chevron imprint in the sand. It's also a war of vigilance, to watch or to be watched, often fought from the cover of ambush. Tiny sporadic conflicts that take an inexorable toll in wounded and dead. For such is the nature of insurgent warfare in Africa today, using the means of the enemy to combat that enemy, successfully. Brown South African Army fatigues fit in well in an equally drab environment. Patrols that can go on for weeks and yield nothing are as soul-searing as they are essential. They form the basis of this kind of conflict, for it is necessary to have men on the ground to counter the presence of the enemy. It's men, not machines, that win wars. Even SWAPO knows that much. Totally integrated, the soldiers, many still in their late teens, are fit and active. Some deplore the conditions, but accept that it's a job that needs to be done. Any movement through the operational area presents problems, particularly from roads that haven't been cleared of landmines. But if you have to move, you keep off the roads and make your own tracks in the bush. In summer, it can be a grind of slush and mud. In winter, for the seasons even in this corner of semi-tropical Africa are fairly clearly defined. It's a perpetual battle against dirt and dust. Because of the threat of landmines, there are certain routines which are adhered to stringently. If you travel along roads in a region where SWAPO might have been active, you strap yourself in to minimize the effects of blast. The argument is basic. It might not happen, but it could. Essentially, it's a self-contained war. You carry what you need with you. Each man, each vehicle, each unit is a compact fighting element on its own in a land made hostile by alien elements. Much of the activity is low-key. Armored vehicles such as these are more of an event, except when the South African forces go into Angola after the enemy. A string of armed camps have been sighted in the operational area, many of them directly adjacent to the Angola border. Here too, vigilance is essential. Camp is home to many of the young men posted to the area. The conditions are Spartan. You come back from a patrol and fit into the routine which allows for few diversions. Highlight of the week might be a shower, for water is sparse. The men quickly learn to make do with what little they have, for all of Umberland and adjacent regions have been racked by a 5-year drought. The men wash and mend their own clothes in a region where personal hygiene is the responsibility of all. Apart from the enemy, the biggest single consideration in this desolate land remains water. To the troops, it's as precious as free time, for during the dry season, every usable drop has to be coaxed from the soil by pump and filtered to make it palatable. Many of the boreholes have dried up.
And how do you rate your buddies as a fighting force? I like they're excellent. The best people I ever work with. Excellent people, our unit. And when you do your operations, they're well planned, and they know what they're doing. It's people back home think it's completely all over. It's not. It's restricted to the area, operational area.
Is this, would you reckon, an essentially black against white war?
Definitely not. I think well, a lot of the operations we do are with black troops, and they are fighting with us. We're fighting with them, actually, because it's their country.
And would you rate the black troops on par with the white troops?
In a different sense. They have a much greater sense of the bush than we do. And I think, our training, which is a little more conventional, combined with their bush sense, it comes out quite well.
There is no doubt that conflict has molded the average South African troopie into a well-trained and coordinated fighting element. Strong and fit, these were boys just a year ago. This is one of the reasons why the South African Army is considered one of the 2 best combat-trained forces in the West today. When combat does come, they're ready for it. An evening attack in the operational area presents few surprises. The enemy lobs a few mortars and then withdraws. The South Africans retaliate with every weapon in the arsenal. It can be a terrifying experience.
What is probably the most hair-raising experience you've had in this operation so far?
I guess it was a camp attack that we accomplished in late January.
Where was that?
It was in Angola.
And what happened?
We came upon a camp in our general area of operations late at night. Well, it was almost dusk. And we took some heavy fire. We sustained immediate heavy fire. And we occupied a camp and took part of the camp out. And then we were ordered to pull back. Upon pulling back, we sustained heavy ground fire, overhead fire, through all complete communist bloc weapons. You could pick out which weapons were which.
Mortars?
Mortars, your regular Soviet communist bloc 14.5 and things like this. And we were there for about 2 to 3 hours, and then we pulled back and then went in the next day.
Did you take any casualties in pulling back?
We sustained a few casualties on the first initial contact with the enemy, and then we sustained 1 casualty on the way back.
Anyone killed?
2 people were killed on the operation.
This is probably one of the most subtle instruments of terror yet devised by man. It was designed by the Russians for war, and it has been adapted by every terrorist movement in the world. It's the RPG-7 rocket and launcher. It's minute, can be handled by one man. It can knock out a fair-sized tank. Correctly placed, it can also knock out several men in a patrol or a building, or any target that the enemy chooses. It's constructed in such a way that even an idiot could handle it properly because it's got no recoil. Yet this projectile moves at the speed of an average handgun bullet.
SWAPO and its Eastern Bloc allies have also used the RPG-7 against aircraft. The weapon is suited for this kind of deployment. Helicopter pilot Tinus van Rensburg was at the receiving end of one of them.
Well, close to a year ago, next Tuesday, a year ago, while doing a low-level military operation, a sortie in Angola, my aircraft was hit by RPG-7 rocket, and I was forced to do a crash landing. I was thrown clear during the crash, and I couldn't get up. I was injured, the back injury. I started crawling forwards because 5 people SWAPO were firing at us at that stage.
What happened to your engineer?
He's trying to get out of the chopper, but I think he picked up shrapnel from the shot itself, and then he had to get out of the chopper on the enemy side, and he was shot down.
Any South African casualty calls for immediate action, and here the Air Force has its work cut out. If time and circumstances allow, a doctor will be airlifted to the patient. More often than not, the unit's medic will have stemmed any flow of blood or perhaps administered an intravenous drip to counter shock. Under battle conditions, these men need to know what they're doing, and they do. The South Africans pride themselves on the fact that a man seriously wounded in the operational area can, feasibly, be evacuated from the battle zone to one of the major hospitals in the Republic within 4 or 5 hours. 3 at a pinch if connections are right. This record, significantly, is bettered only by Israel at present. It's also true that for every South African casualty, the revolutionary movement suffers 20. During 1980, SWAPO lost 1,500 men in action. These were the fortunate ones. For them, the war is over. And the dead, always grotesque in their bloated, stiff-limbed configurations, invariably a reminder that any kind of war takes its toll, irrespective of political allegiance. There were 17 dead terrorists brought back after a single afternoon's firefight, not many kilometers north of here. There was one South African wounded in the battle. Crucial to the South African effort against SWAPO is the role of the Air Force in the operational area. The core of this activity is centered in Ondangwa, regarded by some observers as possibly the busiest operational Air Force base in the Western world. Lying about 100 kilometers south of the Angolan border, the facility is relatively well guarded against attack, though this has not precluded SWAPO from launching long-range mortar attacks in the past. Life in Ovambaland is not all work. Social activity at Ondangwa Air Force Base centers around possibly one of the most attractive little bars in the region. Here, after hours, gather the men who have turned the course of many a battle. Out of uniform, they would probably have been no different from thousands of others relaxing after a hard day's work. These are the charioteers of South Africa's operational skirmishes. I've seen them in action, and if ever a group were worthy of an accolade, they are. Head of Air Force Operations in Sector 1 explains the role of the Air Force.
There are three categories: reconnaissance, offensive support, and air logistic resupply.
In reconnaissance, do you go across into Angola?
Yes, when required.
And what is the role on those occasions?
It's to locate enemy camps and to seek them out.
And when this is achieved, what then?
There's normal follow-up operations. If you remember last year we had Operation Smoke Shell, and we supply the necessary offensive support for those operations.
With jets?
With jets.
And what else?
Heliborne forces, with heliborne assault troops as well.
The insignia of No. 1 Parachute Battalion, one of the crack units on permanent standby. These are the heliborne forces mentioned by Colonel Holmes. The alarm is sounded, and they're prepared to go out to assist one of the units in the field that has sounded a contact. And they have roughly 90 seconds to get to the helicopters that will airlift them into battle.
Check your kit for now.
The routine is always the same. Gear is issued and checked, weapons prepared for action. Final mustering is a formality, for time is vital. In the tradition of airborne forces all over the world, one man checks and confirms to another. Then they're ready to move, and to battle they go. In the helicopters en route to uncertain combat, there is no time for banter. Mouths dry, the men are intent only on the battle ahead. Occasionally, some of their friends have not come back, and they know it. The prickly sensation of imminent combat remains the only consideration now.
pentru misiune de securitate aeriană și de tot animalele saborizate de dată și ulterior saborizate identificate video. Voltaj total 6450 kg forță, este motorul Volvo 14.
Decolare cu forțaj cuplat, cu viraj pe dreapta strâns. Dublă întoarcere, maxare. Forțele aeriene cehe, doamnelor și domnilor. Viteză limită! Pregătiți-vă aparatele de fotografie! Superbă evoluție a pilotului ceh. Tururi cu axare către public, trage pe Tururi! 5 până la 7 gheuri în acest moment, suprasarcină susținută. Punct de atac mare, ieșiri din ea. 3 sferturi de tonou și în șandară viraj de luptă, cumanez la 40 de grade pe direcția display-ului. Coborârea acum observați. Frumoasă ieșire din viraj, raza este foarte mică datorită acestui sistem aerodinamic fly-by-wire. Acum se pregătește ușor pentru o limită de viteză. Viteza limită este, atenție, de 170 de noduri. Unghiul de atac va fi de 30 de grade. Prezentarea pe direcția 250. Avionul este placat. În acest moment sistemul fly-by-wire, condus electronic, coordonat de către calculator, corelează bordul de atac, tracțiunea și fileul de aer. O imagine foarte frumoasă, care merită toate fotografiile. Forțajul total este cuplat pentru a începe ușor câștigul tracțiunii. Direct în șandară! Frumoasă
armament și carburant. Două motoare. Puteți observa amperajul canard, cum stă în poziție conformă, care asigură atât manevrabilitate cât și sustentație la viteză minimă.
Care are 120 de proiectile. Acesta este un salut pentru viteză foarte mare, prezentare în configurare de aterizare pe direcția 07, indice aritoarele canar, cum lucrează în permanență, reținge de motor și aterizare cu final de program. Capitanul Laszlo Șap, mari aplauze pentru escadila numărul 1 de la Kecskemet. Îl vom revedea și în programul de seară.
Haideți să-l aplaudăm pilotul ștabului 39 Gripen, forțele aeriene cehe. Da, mulțumesc tuturor